Hello, Pillow Frighters. I am here with Frank Dietz. We have just discussed Black Roses, and we wanted to give you a little Patreon extra talking about another little film that he was in around the same time called Rock and Roll Nightmare. And, even if the other girls didn't want to do it, I still would have done this because this is right in my wheelhouse. This is everything I love in my life. If you examined my heart and my soul, you'd probably see Thor going like this. So I'm very, very excited to do just a little casual chat because, we would be remiss if we talked about Black Roses but didn't talk about another metal movie that you were in. So thank you for indulging the Patreon subscribers. So I will start with just a little synopsis in case you haven't seen it, and then we will talk a little bit about it. So Rock and Roll Nightmare, aka The Edge of Hell. It's a 1987 horror film directed by John Fasano, and it starts Canadian bodybuilder / heavy metal singer John Michael Thor as a heavy metal singer named John Triton, whose band also happens to be called the Tritons. At a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, a hopeful hair metal band seeking inspiration to record their upcoming new LP will soon find themselves in a furious confrontation against the Prince of Darkness himself. Ooh! I want to jump right into the ending and just go into it, but I'm not going to. I'm going to try to go a little bit linear with this.
Okay.
You answered some of the questions that I had in the Black Roses episode, which I'm assuming you have seen it by now, but if you haven't, go listen to that because it's incredible, and then come back to this. So the first question I really had was how you got involved with John Fasano and how you ended up in both of these films. Like, did you have to audition, which you answered, but if you don't mind repeating yourself again, so how that started?
Well, not at all. As I said in the Black Roses episode, John Fasano and I grew up in the same town. So I knew John when he was in third grade. I was a little older than him.
Wow.
And we both found that we loved monster movies. And that's how we became friends.
Mm-hmm.
And he was an artist also. Like we both were artists. We loved to draw classic monsters, Planet of the Apes, Vincent Price, etc. We spent a lot of time doing that, and then we did in high school era and a little bit beyond. We did a lot of theater, a lot of local theater. So I knew John forever, and it wasn't until many years later, well, I don't want to say many, maybe 6 or 7 years later, something like that, where we had not spoken, where he called me out of the blue and told me that he had written a script, a horror movie, and that he wondered if I was interested in auditioning for it. And of course I was. I was waiting my whole life for that phone call, basically. And so, growing up a monster kid my entire life, it was just like, oh, I'm going to be in a horror movie. That's fantastic. Yeah. And that is what started our working relationship. So we did one movie together, Zombie Nightmare. That was that's a whole nother episode to talk about. It was such a disaster.
Oh.
And you Mystery Science Theater 3000 people might know it as episode 604.
You know you've made it when you're on Mystery Science
Absolutely,
Theater, so.
yeah. But while making Zombie Nightmare, John and I definitely sort of made this decision that we were going to make more horror movies. And in fact, while we were, you're going to love this, while we were still making Zombie Nightmare, John had already been speaking to Shapiro Glickenhaus, the distributor, about making another movie. And so I remember John and I were in the hotel room. We're still in Montreal. And he's on the phone talking to Shapiro Glickenhaus. And I'm just standing there, and the TV in the hotel room is on, and I'm listening to John, and John is saying, "Oh yeah, we'll also film that in Canada, And he goes, "Oh, what's it called? What's it called? It's called and he didn't come up with a title yet. And I looked down at the TV, and it's in the afternoon, and what comes up on the TV is the soap opera The Edge of Night.
Oh.
And so I whirled around and I just went, The Edge of Hell. And John goes, it's called The Edge of Hell. And he goes, oh, you like it? Great. Yeah. I thought, he was like, yeah, I thought it was a really good title.
Oh my God. That's like that. What's my name? Kaiser Sose.
And that was the name of the movie the whole time we were filming it.
Wow.
It did not become Rock and Roll Nightmare until the distributor took it.
I read that it was changed to appeal for the VHS.
But in Canada, it's still called The Edge of Hell.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. They're both great names. I can see the appeal, though. We were talking about it in the Black Roses episode. Rock and Roll Nightmare, the title just feels more rock and roll. It feels more just accessible, I feel like.
I was just worried that every movie that I was going to make was going to have the word nightmare in it.
You know what? What a great career, though.
I know.
Nightmare City. Well, not Nightmare
Black
City.
Roses Nightmare.
Yeah. This movie fascinates me on so many levels because one of my favorite, I don't like saying so bad it's good because that can mean so many different things. For me, when I had the idea to start a podcast, I initially came into it titling it Hot Mess Horror. Mm-hmm. And I mean that in a term of endearment. If you've heard other episodes, you know when I say hot mess, I mean that in the best compliment possible because I love movies, especially 80s movies that are low budget. They know what they are. They're not trying to be Oscar winners. They're not trying to be elevated horror, which don't get me started on elevated horror. But, you know, the just silly, good fun popcorn movies you throw on, you drink with your friends, and you have a good time. This is what this movie is, and I love it so much. And I just love the fact that a real-life bodybuilding metal singer, Canadian metal singer named Thor, he wrote, produced, scored, and starred in it.
No.
Okay, so I wanted to clarify that with you because I was going to say he's like the Canadian Tommy Wiseau. It's just like, did he just put this on because he wanted to? But I wanted to clarify with that because was that like that was a Thor thing or was that like a...
No, Thor didn't write the movie.
Okay, that's right.
John Fasano wrote the movie.
Okay.
The thing was that we were Americans making a movie in Canada. Mm-hmm. So, because the tax incentives were really good. It was worth it to film up there. But here's the thing. The rules, the Canadian Film Commission, were that if the director of the movie is American, then the writer has to be Canadian.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And like your cast, there's a certain level of there's only so many Americans you can put in there.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
That a certain percentage have to be Canadians. Mm-hmm. So with Thor, it was great because right off the bat, he's the lead. So that, takes care of that. But as far as the writing goes, they basically had to pull a fast one. And so they throw John Thor's name on the script and nobody really blinks an eye about it. They don't care.
I didn't know. That's why I wanted to clarify because it seemed okay. So this was just a vehicle for Thor. Like I just didn't understand.
Well, it was a vehicle for Thor. There's no doubt about that. Thor had been in Zombie Nightmare, had played after we fired the first zombie character, the actor, Thor came in mid movie and took over, and we all got along with Thor great. And John Fasano and Thor got a really great relationship, and so Edge of Hell or Rock and Roll Nightmare was developed specifically to be a vehicle for Thor, for his music, for his bodybuilding, and so forth. But John wrote the script. When I first read the script, I mean it was John's script.
Okay,
there's no doubt about it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And you know what? That, if you really study John's work, the kind of dialogue that John writes, it's obviously John.
Okay.
It's filled with childish innuendos and yeah. Like, but anyway, but you know it's not knocking Thor at all because you know he had a huge part in pulling the film together. With
kind of reminds me of the old who directed Poltergeist.
Yeah.
Tobe Hooper and Spielberg. Not comparing Thor to Spielberg or Tobe Hooper or anything, but was it a limited crew on this set? Was it
very small?
Okay.
Very small. I mean, I think we pretty much had just the bare minimum that we could get by with. So, I mean, we shot that movie for something like, I think, a total of $60,000.
Whoa.
And we now I've not actually substantiated this, but I've heard it said that, or John, let me say this. John used to tell me that they basically lied to Shapiro Glickenhaus and told them that we had matched their $60,000 and that we actually had $120,000.
Oh my gosh.
We did not.
Oh.
So we made the entire movie for the $60,000.
Oh my God.
And so to do that, we all had to wear many hats. So almost nobody did just one thing.
I was going to ask, because you mentioned in Black Roses that you did some of the effects. So did you do some of the effects on this one as well?
I did a lot of them, actually.
Oh.
We spent many months previous to going back up to this was Toronto, yeah. Down in John Fasano's New York house basement, where Tony Bua was essentially teaching us how to create all these effects.
Wow.
So he taught us how to use sculpting tools, how to make a mold, how to run foam.
That's so cool.
Like we were all new at it.
Yeah.
But we were determined to learn it and do it ourselves. So all of the effects, with the exception of the devil at the end, and that's another story.
We'll get there.
God, yeah.
We'll get there.
We're all done by myself, by Jim Sorrell, who played Steak, by John himself. We all spent months, learning how to do this stuff and creating these effects, and it was great.
That's actually pretty incredible because, again, a lot of people in other people's eyes, it's cheesy effects. It's so cheesy, which, to be fair, most anything prior to 2000 people would consider cheesy because it's not CGI or whatever. Right. I find that endearing, and I see the challenges in making those, and I think I just see the talent behind making those, which is why I love these movies so much. And the fact that y'all just learned how to do that stuff is incredible.
Yeah.
Did you do the spewing little cyclops?
I puppeteered. No, I didn't puppeteer the one who spits in the cup. I puppeteered the one who's smoking the cigarette, and I think the one where the Coke can goes on his hand.
Yes,
and
yes.
Yeah. I created some of the masks for it. I created the squids.
Oh, okay.
That we threw it.
Oh my gosh, I get that.
John Thor.
I love those so much.
Oh, and I also did the chicken demon that's in the refrigerator.
Oh my gosh, that's so good.
Yeah,
I love that so much.
Yeah, so it really was. I mean, I think I said this on the Black Roses episode that this really was hey kids, let's go make a movie in my dad's barn.
Oh my!
And the fact that we were actually filming a lot of it in a barn made that even more close to the truth.
I love that so much. I love anything that involves limited budget because knowing what you can get away with and what you're capable of doing is incredible to me. Well, this next question, because I'm going to jump right into it. I'm going to read it because it's very long-winded and I was very excited to write it.
Okay.
So this was my first time seeing Rock and Roll Nightmare when I just watched it. I've always wanted to see it, but I never knew how to get a hold of it. And because the cover is one of those covers where I'm like, that speaks to me. That speaks to me because that is so metal and it's 80s and it's everything I ever dream about at night. So I was very happy that I was able to find it and watch it. And since this was my first time watching it, I thought it would be many things. But I didn't think it would be a film with a huge plot twist that I didn't see coming, and not just any plot twist, a batshit crazy crazy one where, spoilers if you have not seen the movie, you can stop it now and watch it, or you can listen to the spoilers. Spoilers. Okay. Not just a batshit crazy one where Triton just so happens to be a badass metal archangel named the Intercessor who bamboozles the devil named Bub by essentially saying it was all in his head with a band not really existing and actually being shadow people that the devil was possessing. What was your reaction when you first read that ending?
Oh, I loved it. I thought this is it's so John Fasano, number one.
It came so out of left field. Yeah. I had to rewind it and be like, did I miss something?
Yeah.
What?
Well, earlier before we started recording the other episode, I pointed out there's a caricature of Felissa Rose from Sleepaway Camp there, and we were talking about how that movie, if it wasn't for this crazy ending, this shocking ending, that nobody would pay any attention to that movie, because that is what, otherwise it seems like just another 80s slasher movie where that there were a dime a dozen back then.
Yes.
And this is a movie that turns it upside down in the last act and does something that's just so outrageous that you can't not, like, everyone is just like, what did I just see? Like,
and this movie actually really deserves a second watch. I remember one of the questions I had was, how did all those people fit in the van that drove for 10 minutes in this movie? Like, how did they all fit in there? And then you go back, it's like, wow.
The real answer,
yeah,
they weren't in there.
Yeah, they weren't in there. And you think everyone is so cliched. This is so by the book. Yeah. But that was the point. Right. They were written to be cliched because he learned from the horror movies. And I actually think that is brilliant. I love that so much.
Yeah. And what's really weird is now the van scene, is as infamous, is almost as infamous as the last act.
The fight.
But what's so funny is that I realized not that long ago that in the weirdest way possible, it almost justifies it, because if they were shadow people to begin with, then there never would have been anybody in the van until he got to the farmhouse. Right.
Oh my gosh.
But that wasn't planned. So,
oh my God.
I mean, the truth is that the movie ran very short, like 6 minutes short. And it had to be padded.
See, and I love it because usually it's like add boobs, add sex. Did they add both to this one? Because there was a lot of sex in this one.
We didn't. No, everything that was shot in those 7 or 8 days. We did not have the luxury of being able to do any kind of reshoots, and that's part of the reason that the van scene exists. Is that was shot way after the fact, after the movie came up short, and the distributor was like, well, it has to be at least 86 minutes, I think is what 87 minutes. And so John was now stuck with this situation where, what can I shoot where that's not going to cost me any money? And what resources do I have? I can't afford a camera crew. I can get a hold of a camera. So what are the things? All of the American actors are already back in New York.
Oh, wow.
They're not still up there.
Yeah.
And the Canadian actors have probably moved on to, whatever their next gig or whatever. And even then they couldn't pay them.
Yeah.
But because John Thor was a producer on it, like, he was obligated to. So basically what John Fasano had to work with were 3 things. He had a camera, didn't have sound equipment, he had Thor, and he had the van. Those are the 3 things.
Wow.
So that van scene was shot MOS, meaning their mid-out sound is what that means. And it's just John in the van, right? Pretending like he's talking to people in the van, right? And then there was another scene at the end, which was just Thor standing in a graveyard, which they found a graveyard, and they just had him, and they did a voiceover later for it.
Okay.
That, so they didn't have to record any sound or anything like that. So that was the 2 things that they were able to shoot to extend the movie, aside from slowing down the end crawl as long as they could, to grab another minute out of it or minute and a half out of it. But I mean, that's the truth about the van scene. I mean, it was that wasn't filmed until way after we had shot the movie.
I love it though, and it's when you're watching it, if you don't know the backstory, it's like, why is this so long? But if you know the backstory, I want to rewatch it because I love it so much.
Alyssa, it is 3.5 minutes long. I timed it. It's 3.5 minutes of nothing but a van driving down a street.
I love it so much. That's talking about the beauty of it.
It is hilarious.
Oh my gosh. I had only one more question, but there's a couple questions that just sparked interest. So if you don't mind talking a little bit more, you mentioned you rolled your eyes when you talked about the devil puppetry.
Yeah.
I need to talk about that ending. No. I really need to talk about that wrestling.
Okay.
So much.
So now, John Thor was also sort of he was a bodybuilder,
right?
A weightlifter, dabbled a little in wrestling. And John Fasano was a huge wrestling fan.
Okay.
So I think the intention always was that it was supposed to be this fight between the devil himself when he finally shows himself and the archangel, the intercessor. And so John had hired this one guy, Arnold, to create the devil.
Okay.
Right. And the guy had a long time to be able to work on it, to create it. And John, again, he didn't want it to look like a guy in a suit. He wanted it to be this thing that couldn't be a guy in a suit.
Yeah.
So Arnold builds this thing and he shows up with it in Canada. And the thing weighed more than a Volkswagen bus.
Oh my gosh.
It was so heavy.
Oh, wow.
And the thing is that, we had to prop this thing up and hold it up. So, it took 5 of us to manipulate that thing.
Oh my gosh.
Poor John Fasano had to, at some point. Now, thankfully, John was a pretty strong guy himself. He was a big, bulky kind of guy. Would have to hold up with one arm this thing that had to weigh 50 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
I'm saying at least. And hold it up so that John Thor could fight it. It was, oh my God.
But I wouldn't give miserable. To see BTS footage.
It was miserable.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
I mean, in the end, being the movie that it is, I guess in certain ways it adds to the hilarity of it.
It does.
And then John Thor standing there in his codpiece and his gold lemming.
It is fabulous.
And his big 80s hair and his eyeliner and all. It's just so over the top and so unexpected that I love it. I love the reactions people get from it. I just love the what the was that?
No, seriously. Yeah. And when he goes he's like, that's my soul. My soul is John Michael Thor. That's just who I am. I mean, props to him because he gives it his all in the ending. He goes balls to the wall, and it is fabulous.
Here's the thing. The thing about Thor is that he never did anything halfway. He was completely committed to what he was doing. Especially in the shower scene.
Of course. I would be too.
Which, by the way, you have to understand that water was ice cold in that shower.
Oh, I don't even want to think about that now. Oof.
Doesn't do Thor any favors, I'll tell you that right now.
Oh my God. Well, it does her favors. I'll say that. It does someone favors. I'm just going to ask you my 2 other questions because otherwise, if I don't stick to the script, I will keep you all day. Okay. I'm precious of your time. One quick little other side question. Did you actually play instruments? Were you the bass player in the...
I was a bass player in Rock and Roll Nightmare, and I was the bass player at the beginning of Black Roses.
Oh.
And do I play the bass? Not a lick.
Oh my gosh.
I do not play guitar. It was all fake.
Well, it's right there. You can play my bass if you need to.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah. So in fact, for the close-ups, they would actually put somebody else in my costume and
Really?
shot tight for to see that it looked like I was actually playing. So that's the magic of movies.
The
right?
magic of movies.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So my final question for you is: would you rather face off against Damien and his demon band, or the Devil Bub and his gaggle of starfish squid monsters?
Well, Damien weighs considerably less than the puppet in Rock and Roll Nightmare. So I think I might, Sal's got some reach maybe, but I think I could hold up for a bit. Yeah.
At least like a really banger of a song. Well, both of them have banger of a songs that are playing during those scenes, but fair answer.
I accept the challenge.
Oh my God. Accept the challenge. I love that song so much. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk about Black Roses. And why was I about to say Nightmare on Elm Street? Rock and Roll Nightmare. It's just one of
so many nightmares.
So many nightmares. Frank does the nightmare movies, y'all.
Yes,
you gotta go to the Fright Nightmare movies. Where can people on our Patreon find you?
You can find me on social media on Facebook as Frank Dietz, and the Frank Dietz on Instagram and Twitter. And I just started doing TikTok again. So find me on there too.
Yay.
I do have a website too. It's sketchythingsart.com.
And you have a book?
I have a book.
Mention that?
I have a new book. It's called Monsters, Movies, and Me. And it's a whole bunch of stories like the ones I've been telling here today.
And until next time, sweet screams, everyone. And whatever you do,
don't fall asleep first.
Ooh, otherwise Thor's gonna get you with his muscles.